5 years ago, on June 7, 2013, the announcement was made by Southern California Edison that the San Onofre nuclear generating station was permanently shut down, and activists, homeowners, grandparents, all kinds of people throughout Southern California and around the world celebrated, thinking, finally, it's over. Except in nuclear terms, it is never over, as we've been learning, especially with San Onofre. That's why when you hear someone who really knows what she is talking about tells you,
and I like to point out to your audience that if Edison gets away with doing this on one of the most pristine beaches in the country, on an earthquake fault, in a tsunami zone, in the middle of millions of people, they're going to do this anywhere they want. And this is not a little local regional problem. This is something that is of national consequence.
well, when you hear something like that, you realize that you are stuck in the seat that we all share.
Nuclear hot seat, what are those people thinking? Nuclear hot seat, what have those boys been drinking? Nuclear hot seat, the corium is sinking. Our time to act is shrinking, but our activists are linking. Nuclear hot seat, it's the bomb.
Welcome to Nuclear Hot Seat, the weekly international news magazine keeping you up to date on all things nuclear from a different perspective. My name is Libby Halevi. I'm the producer and host, as well as a survivor of the nuclear accident at 3 Mile Island from just 1 mile away. So I know what can happen when those nuclear so-called experts get it wrong. This week, we look at the situation at the San Onofre nuclear reactors in Southern California on the Pacific Coast in an energetic conversation with Charles Langley and Nina Babiars of Public Watchdogs, a group that closely monitors what's happening at San Onofre. Last weekend, they produced an event to create an aerial art exhibit at the beach next to those nuclear reactors, in association with the Ohashiman Nation and hundreds of concerned citizens. Plus, in light of what we've learned about Bangladesh's planned nuclear build, we revisit an interview from 2014 with Professor Kumrul Haider, a physics professor from Fordham University who had just published an op-ed against the project in a Bangladesh newspaper, likening nuclear to the sixth horseman of the apocalypse. He provides an insider's perspective on what nukes in Bangladesh might mean. We will also have nuclear news from around the world, numbnuts of the week for outstanding nuclear boneheadedness, activist shoutouts, and more honest nuclear information than got shared with the public at G7 last week. All of this coming up in just a few moments. Today is Tuesday, June 12, 2018, and here is the week's nuclear news from a different perspective. Okay, so let's get this one out of the way. The U.S. and North Korea signed what is being called a comprehensive agreement, though it's only 2 pages long, to seek complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. This following the summit that took place between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un in Singapore. No path to denuclearization was spelled out, no timelines given, and this loose agreement, 2 pages, remember, risked giving North Korea room to continue work on its weapons program while getting relief from sanctions pressure. Mainstream media is all over this one. Choose your news source and follow it as you wish. Lots going on regarding the Hanford site in southeastern Washington state, the most radiologically polluted site in the Western Hemisphere. The U.S. Department of Energy, DOE, put one of its contractors, Bechtel National Incorporated, on notice that it must explain what DOE calls a potentially unrecoverable quality issue at a multi-billion-dollar waste processing facility at the Hanford nuclear site. In a March 6, 2018 letter from DOE's Office of River Protection, signed by DOE Federal Project Director William Hamill, it stated that DOE has identified the quality records needed to demonstrate that the important to safety structural steel could perform its safety function, and these documents were either missing or of indeterminate quality. This condition is a potentially unrecoverable quality issue. What is the result? Earlier this week, DOE announced that Mr. Hamill, the author of the letter, was transferred from his position as federal project manager to another part of the agency far away from oversight duties at the waste treatment plant at Hanford. But internal documents obtained by Hanford Challenge indicate that approximately 14.4% of the required safety documents were missing. According to Tom Carpenter, executive director of Hanford Challenge, this could be a showstopper. We applaud new DOE leadership for finally holding the contractor's feet to the fire on this critical issue for quality assurance, but I'm more interested in what happens next. For DOE to fix this, it must reinforce a rigorous nuclear safety culture and put a new contractor in place that takes nuclear quality assurance seriously. But that's not all the news from Hanford, because
Nuclear hot seat, nuclear hot seat, nuclear hot seat, numbnuts of the week.
what's in a name? As Shakespeare said, as Shakespeare wrote, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, and the stink of nuclear will not go away no matter what we call it. The Department of Energy is seeking public comment on a proposal to relabel, reclassify, rename the Hanford nuclear site's highly radioactive tank waste so that it will not have to comply with the time-consuming requirements of treating and disposing of the remaining waste in a legally compliant and protective manner. Right, nothing protects us from the dangers of nuclear waste better than a name change. This proposed declassification of some 66,000 gallons of high-level radioactive waste residue and call it, get this, waste incidental to reprocessing, despite the fact that it contains plutonium concentrates 12 to 57 times greater than the plutonium disposal rate set by Department of Energy and the EPA. If they get this reclassification, they will be allowed to dump cement or grout on top of the waste and abandon it in place forever. Grout does not stop radiation from leaking from nuclear waste. And that is why, Department of Energy, you are, once again, this week's
Nuclear hot seat, numbnuts of the week.
There's a new study out by Marco Kaltofen of the Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Microanalysis of Particle-Based Uranium, Thorium, and Plutonium in Nuclear Workers' House Dusts. We'll have a link to this up on the website, nuclearhotseat.com, under this episode, number 364. Over to Japan, where there is a mayoral election taking place in Rokasho Village, a small village next to Yokohama that contains a nuclear fuel cycle center. It's operated by Japan Nuclear Fuel Limited, which is notorious for its incompetent management, according to the Japanese Nuclear Regulatory Authority. A Ms. Junko Endo is running as an anti-nuclear fuel cycle candidate, and they have asked for encouraging thoughts and feelings to be sent to her via her Facebook page, which we will link to in this episode. The page is in Japanese, but they encourage people to write in any language that is natural to you, so that proof can be given that there is support for her position from around the world. In Ukraine, the forest fire that had raged for 3 days last week in the restricted zone around Chernobyl, scene of the world's worst nuclear accident in 1986, worst until Fukushima, that is, the fire was extinguished this past Thursday with what is being said to be no increase in radiation in the air being detected. However, Ukrainian Emergency Situation Services added that radiation levels in Kiev, Chernobyl, and the power plant have not exceeded normal levels. There's no definition of what normal levels are. Meanwhile, we've heard that Dr. Timothy Mousseau and his crew at Chernobyl are well and proceeding with their work on the dogs of Chernobyl and their spaying and neutering and testing of the animals. We'll show you some pictures of that on our website. In the UK, a little bit of good news. During the first quarter of this year, Britain's wind farms produced more electricity than ever before and surpassed the amount of electricity generated by the country's nuclear fleet for the first time ever. Last quarter, wind and solar together generated enough electricity to surpass nuclear's contribution to the grid. But continued wind development and strong conditions helped push wind over nuclear all on its lonesome. So can we shut down the nukes yet? An interesting article from Beyond Nuclear International about how one man, the sole surviving member of the Juk clan, refused to be swayed to give up rights to his ancestral lands to be turned into a uranium mine. We will have a link up to this inspiring story on our website. India announced last Wednesday that it is collaborating with Russia to build the Ruipur nuclear power plant in Bangladesh, the first initiative under an Indo-Russian deal to undertake atomic energy projects in third world countries. Thus, Bangladesh is poised to join the ranks of 31 other nuclear nations in the world with the construction of the Ruipur nuclear power plant. And the government of Bangladesh has asked that people be proud of this fact. However, there is a band of activists, researchers, scientists, and engineers who are alarmed at the many ways this project jeopardizes the country's security and sovereignty. These concerned citizens, who represent the people's interests, have long been proposing alternatives for cheaper energy and safer technology. They have raised concerns over the various aspects of this project, in other words, radioactive waste management, along with cost of its construction and maintenance, the extreme aftermath in the case of an accident, and other factors. It would do well for us to pay heed to these concerns before it is too late. With that in mind, I want to revisit an interview I did for Nuclear Hotseat number 182 back on December 16 of 2014. I spoke with Professor Kamrul Haider, a physics professor from Fordham University who is originally from Bangladesh. In the full interview, Dr. Haider talks about his time working at the Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories, hotbeds of nuclear weapons research, as well as the implications, some might say the insanity, of a country as small as Bangladesh making plans to build a nuclear reactor. Here are some excerpts from that interview.
See, I'm from Bangladesh. When I saw that the Bangladesh government has signed a deal with one of the corrupt companies in Russia to set up a nuclear power plant in Bangladesh, I said, oh my God, what are they doing? A country of 160 million people, 55,000 square miles. It's a delta. It gets flooded every year, and they're building a power plant there. In case of accident, how are they going to? I mean, around the power plant, probably there'll be 5-6 million people staying. So I started asking the question, how will they evacuate so many people? Even if they evacuate, where are they going to transport them? Then I took an active, myself. I mean, I started writing articles on the Daily Star, and I think you read only one, this Six Horsemen of the Apocalypse. But before that, I wrote 8 or 9 more articles explaining everyone. First is I tried to explain the inside of a reactor so that people understand, I mean, what happens inside a reactor and what are the dangers. Then another article, I outlined the major nuclear reactor accidents because they say that it's safe. It's not safe. There have been 60, 70 accidents, but about 8 or 9 major ones. Then I explained, in one of my articles, I explained, I mean, what they're doing right now with nuclear waste. Okay, there is no solution to the problem of nuclear waste. Whatever we have, it's just like a Band-Aid treatment. United States thought that they had a solution. They wanted to put all these nuclear wastes under a mountain in Nevada, Yucca Mountain. And then geologists came and said that there's an earthquake fault over there. And then they backed out. So still there is no permanent disposal system for this radioactive material. Because, you know, the reactor rod, which contains the uranium, it has to be replaced after a certain amount of time when all the uranium is depleted. And it's full of radioactive material.
I'd like to put some attention on the articles that you have written. The editorial that I saw, the op-ed that I saw, was from a Bangladesh newspaper.
Yeah, the Daily Star. The Daily
Right.
Star. And I publish all my op-eds in Daily Star because I told you that I target my audience, Bangladeshi audience, because that's where the government is going to, they think that they're going to build a nuclear power plant over there.
And what distribution? Has there been any publication beyond the Bangladesh newspapers?
They're not newspapers, but I mean, these days you can find them on the net.
What, if any, impact do you feel that you have had on the nuclear debate in Bangladesh?
People are talking. I mean, at least people with certain background, educational background, they're talking. I mean, my friends tell me who are over there that you're basically raising the awareness of the people over there.
Do you feel that you've had any impact on the decision makers in Bangladesh?
No. They're not going to deviate from their policy. Two reasons. One is these politicians, they don't understand what they're getting into. Second is corruption. And the Russian company that's going to build the nuclear reactor, that's one of the most corrupt company in Russia. And they always go to the seedy third world neighborhoods and sell their reactors. Basically, they share the money. And this reactor in Bangladesh, let me tell you, I don't foresee this power plant being built. $2 billion. You cannot even buy a reactor from a junkyard with $2 billion. Minimum cost is about $6 to $7 billion, but that's in Western countries. In a country like Bangladesh, it has to be at least $5 billion. And they're going to build with $2 billion a 1,000 megawatt power plant. I'll salute them if they can do that. They're basically going to share the money, split the money among themselves. That's why they don't care what I write. But again, my article has effect only on people who read English newspapers. If I could have written it in a local language, which is Bangla, it would have had more, readers. But I'm not as fluent in Bangla as I'm in English, so that's why I have to write in English.
Professor Kamrul Haider, a physics professor from Fordham University, originally from Bangladesh. If you would like to hear the entire interview, you can find it on our website, nuclearhotseat.com, under episode number 182 from December of 2014. We'll have this week's featured interview in just a moment. But first, when it comes to nuclear, unless you know where to look, it's hard to get information that clues you into the manipulations of the industry and its moneyed PR juggernaut. The industry just keeps pushing its expansive, expensive agenda with very little pushback from an uncritical mainstream media that blithely develops their well-groomed talking points without any contradiction. That's why you've learned to count on Nuclear Hotseat to get into nuclear stories with facts, continuity, and context, as well as a healthy dose of skepticism as to the official line. We get behind the scenes, under the skin, and into the heart of nuclear matters every week with fresh information, an unrelenting perspective, and even, when possible, humor. Does having this kind of information on a weekly basis help you understand what's going on nuclear-wise? That's what we're here for. But in order to keep doing it, we need your help. If you value the kind of information Nuclear Hot Seat provides, please give us a boost by sending a donation of any size. We need this to meet our monthly expenses, which can be considerable. To help us out, just go to nuclearhotseat.com and click on the big red donate button. That will allow you to send a one-time donation of any size. And for those of you who want to make a big difference, but like so many people these days lack a budget, you can help us out a little at a time. On the website, we provide a big green donate button that allows you to quickly set up a recurring donation of just $5 a month. If you're here in the U.S., it's about the same as a cup of coffee and a nice tip. And it really does make a big difference in meeting our monthly expenses. So please, do what you can to help Nuclear Hot Seat stay up and running as we search out and share information that the nuclear industry would rather you not know. Whatever you can do to help, you've got my gratitude. Here's this week's featured interview. Last weekend marked the 5th anniversary of the official shutdown announcement for the San Onofre nuclear generating stations, located on the Pacific Ocean coast in Southern California between San Diego and Los Angeles. It was a time of ecstatic celebration by activists in SoCal and around the world. However, the ensuing 5 years have seen a series of actions by the nuclear industry, specifically Southern California Edison, that have proved that when it comes to nuclear, shutting down the reactors is only the first step in a long, contentious process. My guests today are with Public Watchdogs, a nonprofit in Southern California, working to inform the public on the many issues surrounding the San Onofre decommissioning. The group just sponsored a 5th anniversary commemoration of the shutdown on the beach at San Onofre, where they successfully created a massive aerial art display of the Ohashiman Nation's ancestral starman and the word safety, made entirely of surfboards, beachgoers, and members of the indigenous Ohashiman Nation. The display was visible only from the sky, and yes, we have helicopter pictures to show it. To learn more about this event and what turned out to be a comprehensive overview of the problems we still face at San Onofre, I talked with 2 leaders in Public Watchdogs, the group that sponsored the event, Charles Langley, who is Executive Director of Public Watchdogs, and board member Nina Babiars. Charles Langley and Nina Babiars, welcome to Nuclear Hot Seat.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Last weekend marked the 5th anniversary of the official shutdown of the San Onofre nuclear generating station, which, for people who may not be aware of it, is located about 2/3 of the way down from Los Angeles and 1/3 of the way up from San Diego on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. First of all, let's do a little bit of a flashback here. Where were you, and what were your thoughts or feelings when the permanent shutdown was announced 5 years ago?
Well, I was working at a small nonprofit called UCAN, the Utility Consumers Action Network, and I was really excited with the possibility that it was going to be permanently shut down, delighted actually, and I wanted that organization to get involved in what was going on, some of the corruption that was surrounding that shutdown. And they were reluctant to do that. And eventually I was terminated for being a whistleblower. And part of it was my insistence on them getting involved in the nuclear waste issue at San Onofre and safety issues. And it's one of the reasons why I started Public Watchdogs.
And what is Public Watchdogs?
Public Watchdogs is a public advocacy nonprofit, and we are dedicated to making sure that we have fair and just electrical rates. And as we've developed, and as I became more and more aware of what was going on at San Onofre, I shifted the focus of the nonprofit toward safety and nuclear waste. That wasn't really the original intent, but the safety issues at San Onofre are so outrageous and so extreme that we felt that if we could only handle one issue, and because we're a small nonprofit, we really only can handle one issue, that this ought to be the issue. So right now we're all about nuclear safety, but on a broader level, we're about public transparency and fair and equitable electrical rates.
And part of that prioritization to safety became the revelation in looking at the documentation. Almost immediately after the plant was closed, Edison started applying for emergency planning exemptions, massive emergency planning exemptions, and they were granted, even though the chair of the California Energy Commission vehemently opposed them. They were granted by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission anyway. And 24 hours after those massive emergency planning exemptions were granted, the emergency plan was changed. You know, a lot of people out here are aware that the plant was closed, but most of the people are unaware that not only did we have a radiation leak, but that Edison withheld that information from the public for 17 days. And Public Watchdog's mantra is the public has a right to know.
Dropping this back just slightly, how did you get involved with Public Watchdog, with the San Onofre issue, and where were you 5 years ago when this first started coming down?
I got involved with public watchdogs, plural, because I work in transportation. I was a part of a international transportation industry association, and I was legislative chair. I had hired Charles Langley to come in and talk to our annual legislative luncheon on the spending of cap and trade money here in California. It was the first year they had revenue to spend on transportation funding. And he started telling me about this situation at San Onofre, and my initial response was, well, Charles, that can't be possible because it's right beside an interstate highway and the second busiest rail corridor in the United States. And so, Charles invited me to take a look at some of the documentation. And in 1979, I was living in Pittsburgh. I was an engineering news reporter for McGraw-Hill during 3 Mile Island and a government reporter. So when I got into the acronym language, you just can't walk away from what I discovered in that documentation. But 5 years ago when the plant was closed, I was mostly like everybody else. I was reading the headlines of it in the local rag and, of course, concerned because of 3 Mile Island experience, but never in my wildest imagination did I ever anticipate the level of corruption and the lack of public hearings for, keep in mind, we paid for the new generators that failed with a radiation leak. We paid for the electricity that was not generated from those failed generators. Then we paid for the decommissioning, and now we're paying, Edison is putting this in the ground at sea level, 108 feet from the Pacific Ocean in cans that have no underground monitoring system, and they're spending our money and doing it on the cheap. I had, of course, no idea of how pervasive the corruption was that led up to this until we got our heads into the documentation. And then how do you walk away from something like that? You just can't.
How I got involved was there was a meeting in Warsaw, Poland, with the president of the California Public Utilities Commission and some top executives at Southern California Edison, where they tried to figure out how to bail Southern California Edison out for its failed nuclear power plant. And what was particularly upsetting and disturbing to me was that Senator Barbara Boxer went forward to investigate this issue and to find out why the generators failed, and she could get virtually zero cooperation from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Somebody at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or someone of conscience at Edison actually sent a letter by a top executive named Dwight Nunn at Southern California Edison, predicting that if they installed these new steam generators, the steam generators that failed and leaked radiation at San Onofre, that they would experience something called water hammer. And when I saw that letter, my blood ran cold because I'm not a plumber, but I know what a water hammer is. And water hammers are tremendously destructive to plumbing. And what this man was doing was predicting a major plumbing failure in the heating and cooling system at a nuclear reactor, and nobody paid attention to him. And then as the story unfolded, we learned from subsequent investigation that they had taken safety equipment out of these replacement steam generators in order to make room for more steam tubes, which meant they'd make more money. And in order to make room for those tubes, they had to get rid of batwing stabilizers, huge stabilizing rings, and other things that would have suppressed the water hammers. And the result was that these water hammers shook the plumbing at San Onofre apart. And on one fine day in 2012, it blew a leak of deadly radiation into the atmosphere. And that's why they shut it down. It was because they souped up replacement steam generators without getting the proper approval from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And the NRC has backpedaled on this and said, well, they more or less got approval. It was a minor clerical error. But this was a kind of error that put 8.5 million lives in danger. There's enough radiation there to destroy the entire West Coast. It's an unbelievable amount of radiation
That's still there.
that's still there.
Well, there's 3.6 million pounds of radioactive waste. And, you're, in addition to what Charles just described, you asked about some of the other characteristics, the risky characteristics of this whole scenario. And I'd like to point out to your audience that, we've got not one, but two earthquake faults that run immediately under San Onofre. It's in an earthquake fault in a tsunami zone in the middle of millions of people, literally feet beside the second busiest rail corridor in the United States and an interstate highway. And so, Edison likes to quote that it's in the middle of 8.5 million people. But that's really misleading because they took a very small circumference around San Onofre to come up with those numbers. The real number is that, in Orange County alone, because of Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Los Angeles, etc., you've got about 49.5 million people from around the world that visit annually. And San Diego is not far behind that because, of course, San Diego is, finest city. And so you combine those two figures and you've got about 100 million people that are coming into Southern California on an annual basis that have, totally unbeknownst to them, that they are traveling next to a very risky situation. And I like to point out to your audience that if Edison gets away with doing this on one of the most pristine beaches in the country, on an earthquake fault, in a tsunami zone, in the middle of millions of people, they're going to do this anywhere they want. And this is not a little local regional problem. This is something that is of national consequence. We have 104 of these across the country. I think there's 12 or 14 that, just like San Onofre, are currently in decommissioning status. And so again, this is something that the country needs to wake up about, because after all, the wind does blow east. This is setting a national precedent. Are we going to have this in every community, on water tables, in the middle of our children's schools in our cities? Where are we going to put this waste? And that's a national question, and this needs to have national exposure. And I don't mean radiation exposure.
Actually, this is an international issue because there's not a single country that has a good resolution for it. And it's the radioactive elephant in the nuclear industry's living room, where they like to try and point us in other directions. But it's like, excuse me, there are two issues. There's safety and there's waste. And you haven't solved either of those.
And there's a responsibility. The Department of Energy has had like $40.2 billion with a B dollars to not do their job. Think about that. There's a lot of responsibility that goes around. I mean, Edison is putting their waste in our community, but the Department of Energy, this is a can that's been kicked down the road since the Eisenhower administration, for crying out loud. People that are responsible for coming up with a solution to this problem need to stop pointing the finger at the other guy. Sit down and get, like the Manhattan Project, let's bring the best brains that we have in this country to the table to solve this problem, not just immediately, but all future generations. I mean, this stuff's lethal for thousands of years.
Thank you for that brilliant summary of what we face at San Onofre. And let's bring this around to an event that you were involved in, a gathering last weekend to commemorate the shutdown and bring attention to these ongoing problems. Tell us what this project was and how it came about.
Partly it came about because I felt from the beginning that the leaders in the nuclear movement in San Diego and Orange County were primarily going to be women, mothers mostly, and Indigenous Americans, because one of the unique things about San Diego, which is a massive piece of real estate, is that it hosts 27 separate Native American tribes. And it occurred to me that if we saw what was happening at Standing Rock, that maybe we could see something like that happening down here. Now, the reality of it is that all these tribes are as unique as fingerprints, and they have very unique cultures, and they don't necessarily get along very well with each other. But the one tribe that lives and has lived near San Onofre for the last 12,000 years is the Ahashiman Nation. And they were very interested in helping us draw attention to this issue. And the idea was put forward by a woman named Carrie Kim that we should attempt an aerial demonstration, an aerial art installation. And what we did was we created an image on the sand on the beach at San Onofre with about 220 people all laying down on the ground over a grid that was only visible from a helicopter flying above the beach.
And a little bit of background information. The Ohashima Nation is the indigenous tribe that occupied the land that San Onofre was built on for 12,000 years. And it is an incredibly beautiful piece of our world. It's just breathtaking, or as Charles would say, heartbreakingly beautiful. So, there's reason, and it runs deep of the reason that they want to protect.
Yeah, this was the beach where American surfing on the continent anyway was really embraced and invented. And when you stand on this beach below these amazing, massive cliffs, I'm reminded of what Somerset Maugham said about Ireland. It is a place of beauty, strange and terrible. I mean, I've seen people look at these cliffs, this beach, and actually cry because it is so exquisitely beautiful. And what they're doing to it, they're putting a nuclear waste dump 108 feet from the water. And these steel cans they're putting the nuclear waste in are literally a couple of feet above the saltwater table, which is rising due to global warming. So it's we forgot to mention that these cans that they're putting it in are only guaranteed to last 25 years.
And they're only 5/8 of an inch thick stainless steel. And, we could talk forever about the corrosive capability of the sea air, et cetera. But I know you were interested in hearing about our federal lawsuit that was filed last November, and we're waiting any day for a written summary from the federal judge on that case. We sued the federal government. The Department of Justice is defending the Department of Defense, and also we sued Southern California Edison as the plaintiffs in that case. And with regard to the Ohashiman connection, and it's a part of public record. It was something that was published in 2012 in the Federal Registry. Part of our legal response during this legal process, we were required to demonstrate past, present, and future harm. And so with past harm, the Ohashiman elders had shared with us at one point in time that all the way back to the original surveying of the land at San Onofre, Edison had hired a Bechtel archaeologist. And that archaeologist had absconded the human remains from a sacred burial ground on those bluffs where San Onofre is currently built. And upon his death, gave instructions to his family to send those remains back to the Ohashiman Nation. The irony of that is the Ohashiman actually had to get the engagement of another tribe with federal standing in order to rebury those remains at Camp Pendleton. But my point being is that, not only was this past harm, but it was documented in the Federal Registry, and they gave us a letter of support with regard to the extent of past harm and the desecration of human remains. The players in this whole scenario have no shame.
That has been noted for so long. I attended many of the meetings down with the NRC at San Onofre, about San Onofre, and to see the manipulation just in terms of the timing of when people could make comments and how long they could speak. And they always made sure that the public comment period took place after the break when all the media would leave so that the voices would not be heard. And so many other ways where the lies were coming thick and fast. And
the community enragement panel meetings, because they're not engaging. They've not been engaging in an authentic manner. They've not been engaging the public.
No, it's all a game of theater so that it can look good in headlines or in sound bites. But the reality is that they have their agenda. They will push it through. They don't want to hear from us unless we make our voices heard in such a way that they cannot be ignored.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we basically had this art installation on the beach. Is we're trying to figure out alternatives to protesting, because the media has become deaf to the same old story, because every day we've got a terrifying story. It's extremely dangerous, and we have to find new ways to penetrate the media consciousness so they can say, hey, something new is going on here, but it's news. It has to be new in order to report it. So we've spent a lot of time and creativity trying to figure out ways to make this issue fresh, just so we can make people aware, because 99% of the people out here are completely unaware that Southern California Edison is operating what is now the USA's largest privately operated nuclear waste dump.
It was certainly a remarkable display, and we will have the pictures of it taken from the helicopter up on the website under this episode of Nuclear Hot Seat. What I'm curious about is how long did it take and what did it take to pull together something that included a grid on the beach, getting enough people, and hiring the helicopter to take the image?
Well, it was a lot of work by a lot of people over an extended period of time, and a collaborative spirit that overrode the logistics of it all.
I would say we've been talking about this for 6 months, actually aggressively pursuing it for 60 days, and it occupied everyone's time full time for at least 10 or 15 people for the last week.
Public watchdogs did underwrite the financial capability of pulling this together because we're passionate about the public's education and outreach and doing anything that we can to get this word out.
What coordination, if any, did you have for this with the other San Onofre groups, such as SanOnofreSafety.org, Citizens Oversight, or San Clemente Green?
Gary Hedrick from San Clemente Green was there Saturday with his wife, Lori. Of course, they were instrumental in getting San Onofre shut down. We've been working very closely with them and Donna Gilmore as well.
Yeah, regarding Citizens Oversight, their attorney is the law firm of Geary and Severson, which we feel just sold us down the river for $5.4 million. So we're not on very cordial terms with Citizens Oversight. We think they basically threw in the towel and have gone ahead trying to persuade the public that there is a solution at hand for moving this nuclear waste. And one of the ways they portrayed the settlement was incredibly disingenuous. They called it the settlement to move the waste. Well, this waste isn't going anywhere. The only place it's being moved is into concrete silos on the beach at San Onofre.
And one of the reasons that we have the problem that we have is that every single decision that has been made has been behind closed doors and in secret, with Edison making the final decision of what we now have. And, you know, we've done many presentations. We're doing them constantly to various groups. And we've had retired Navy admirals that have sat there and said, well, why didn't they engage our expertise? We've been moving the nuclear waste for the Navy here in San Diego for the last 40 years. Well, there's a good reason why they didn't open it out. Edison has kept everything, and the attorneys have kept everything behind closed doors and in secret, because after all, if they were fully exposed in an open court of law or to the public's knowledge, they'd have to reveal what I consider to be criminal activity. And questions should be asked. Why do we not have one elected official, either locally or nationally, speaking out on this issue? And I pose that question because, you know, we got a bigger problem with regard to campaign contributions and these large utility companies that have deep pockets. So why do we not have anyone speaking out on behalf of the personal safety of their constituents in a leadership role? When have you heard the last time you've heard the word public servant? Put the politics aside. Exposure of radiation knows no sex, age, political party. We could go on and on. But this is something that is a threat to not only human life, but all life in this world as we know it.
You've just done a great job of summarizing everything that we face with San Onofre. There's much more to it, but given what we know now and the position that we are in, what would you like to see happen?
What we would like to see happen is we would like to see the waste moved farther away from the beach. It's going to be legally almost impossible to move it outside the state of California or off the federal lands that it currently occupies right now. Legally, it would take a huge amount of legal firepower to do that. Our hope is, our plan and our intent is to move it further away from the beach, where it's out of the tsunami zone, away from immediate earthquake fault lines, and in thicker reinforced containers, the kind of containers that they use in first world nations like Germany. We have very cheap containers at San Onofre.
I have a slightly different answer to that question. It's because of something that has occurred very recently as Edison started burying these cans. They started burying these cans January 30th, actually the night of the blood moon in the eclipse. We had been covering in all the meetings last year leading up to the scheduling of that burial. And Edison at that time, all last year was predicting that they would get the green light from the NRC to start the burial in the second quarter of 2018, which is right now. But that's not what happened. In the last community arrangement panel meeting in November, Tom Palmisano, the VP that is, reporting out on all this, suddenly indicated on his PowerPoint slide that time frame was moved up to the fourth quarter of 2017. And so you can imagine that become January 1, we're waiting any day for Edison to start the burial. But that's not what they did. What happened on January 5th and January 10th was that Edison proceeded to get other kind of exemptions. And those exemptions were for their liability. And after they got those exemptions for their insurance liability, both on-site and off-site, then they proceeded with the burial. So that just validates how risky that this is, because obviously they wanted to get themselves exempted from any liability before they started moving that waste. And then in the middle of March, and Charles can go into the technical reasoning behind this, they had 4 cans buried in the ground, and on the 5th can, they found a broken bolt. Well, that was not just a little thing. That bolt is part of a system that is to help the circulation of the helium that is circulating around the waste to cool it. And so when they were asked at the February community arrangement panel meeting, why don't you just pull those first 4 cans out of the ground? Tom Palmisano's response is that they didn't have the technical capability to do that. And the NRC then allowed Edison to resume burial at the end of March with cans then that did not have the improved manufacturing process. So, we're predicting they've probably got, about a quarter to a third of these cans in the ground that did not have the improved manufacturing process. So my answer to that question is we want this stopped right now until Edison can explain exactly what it is they're putting into the ground, because right now that's very questionable and they're answering to no one. The public has a right to know what's going on, and this is of national consequence.
This has been an interview that I have wanted to conduct to get the overview for my listeners of what's been happening at San Onofre and where we stand, what has been done, what hasn't been done, and what we hope will be done. For that, I want to thank both of you, Charles Langley and Nina Babiars, for being my guests this week on Nuclear Hot Seat. That was Charles Langley, Executive Director of Public Watchdogs, and Board Member Nina Babiars. We will have a link up to their website, publicwatchdogs.org, and pictures from the photo shoot on our website, nuclearhotseat.com under this episode, number 364. Activist shout-outs! In Washington State, here in the U.S., Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility helped draft a bill, I-1631, which states as its goal to reduce pollution by investing in clean air, clean energy, clean water, healthy foods, and healthy communities. Who could object to anything like that? Right now, they are still gathering signatures to be able to get this initiative up on the coming election. WPSR members have gathered nearly 4,000 signatures, but still need 3,500 more. Now, this is something that can't be done virtually through a petition online. It has to be on-the-ground signatures of Washington State residents. So anyone listening, if you are in Washington or perhaps in Oregon and can get across the border really fast, there's no wall last I heard, contact the office at WPSR.org and do what you can to gather those signatures so this important ballot measure can get on the ballot. And an update on my book. I'm just back from a 5-day unplugged off-grid retreat where I read only one book, mine. Yes, I Glow in the Dark, 1 mile from 3 Mile Island to Fukushima and Nuclear Hotseat received a hand edit of the physical copy, final tweaks, and a proofreading of the manuscript. Within 1 week, I should be able to move into putting it into its template. I am thrilled that one of my first pre-readers was Dr. Helen Caldecott, who sent me the following quote. I find your book absolutely fascinating, so honest, the journey of a pioneering woman unafraid of public scrutiny and with a determination to tell the truth. This book must be read by all people who care about the future of the planet and their children. Thank you, Dr. Caldecott. Now, I can't wait until you have a chance to read it, and to that end, I have a pre-order function available through my website. If you go to nuclearhotseat.com/book, it will do a redirect to the pre-order page on Amazon. This will allow you to have the physical book shipped out on the first day it is officially published. This will also help with my Amazon rankings, as all pre-ordered books will show as being purchased on the same day, which will push me up their ranking order and could get me to bestseller status. It does make a difference, so if you can pre-order, that would be terrific. The money doesn't come out of your account until the book actually ships. And if you are planning to purchase the ebook, there's no need to pre-order. On publication day, it will be available for instant download. I'm working hard to get Yes, I Glow in the Dark out in the next few weeks, with lots of fiddly little bits involved with the template, cover, and production. So bear with me. I promise you it's a read you won't forget. So thanks for your support, thanks for your patience, and hold a good thought. I'm dancing on this one as fast as I can. Again, nuclearhotseat.com/book for pre-orders of Yes, I Glow in the Dark, 1 mile from 3 Mile Island to Fukushima and beyond. Here's today's final thought. I had an energetic conversation recently with some other activists who have a marketing background, as I do. It was about what we can do to promote our information and perspective to the general public in a way that they will actually hear it and accept it. Let's face it, opposing nuclear is not an easy sell. It is easy to ignore that which is invisible. In marketing terms, we need branding, keywords, hashtags, and a program for us all to use them in a coordinated, consistent way. After all, nuclear, deadly, dirty nuclear, has rebranded itself as clean, green, sustainable, the cure to global warming and all that ails you, and lots of other lies. That's what we're up against. And we need to use marketing strategies to counter that. So I had an idea for a branding phrase, only I didn't come up with it myself. Credit must go to Diane Turco of Cape Downwinders in Massachusetts, who said it so powerfully in our interview last week. It's a very simple phrase. Nuclear. The issue is safety. You know, the nuclear industry tries to control the conversation and has succeeded for too long to make it about Jobs, the economy, warheads, electricity, clean green hogwash. No. None of that counts up against the basic tenet that drives us all. Nuclear. The issue is safety. This is a phrase that is for all of us, no matter what part of the nuclear issue we focus on. So I encourage you, all of you, each one of you, to start using this phrase wherever you can. In conversations, press releases, letters to the editor, on signs at protests, print up bumper stickers, t-shirts, put it wherever you can. It's a start of branding our concerns to be identifiable and understandable to the general public. Nuclear. The issue is safety. Pass it on. This has been Nuclear Hot Seat for Tuesday, June 12, 2018. Material for this week's show has been researched and compiled from nuclear-news.net, deunrenard.wordpress.com, miningawareness.wordpress.com, dianuke.org, Beyond Nuclear, Bloomberg.com, LiebertPub.com, HanfordChallenge.org, TheBulletin.org, Fukushima311voices.com, Bologna.org, CleanTechnica.com, PublicWatchdogs.org, the Soul Dead Cubicle Drones who grind out press releases and acronyms for world nuclear news, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and a big shout out to all of you, Nuclear Hot Seat listeners and followers literally around the world, 123 countries on 6 continents and counting. And a big welcome to everyone who's listening on our growing network of broadcast stations around the U.S. All of you show your love for life on this planet by being willing to know the truth and then acting on it. I'm so glad I'm with you on this journey together as kick-ass defenders of nuclear truth and supporters of atomic awareness. Thanks for visiting the Facebook Nuclear Hot Seat page. If you haven't stopped by yet, come on down and check it out. Make sure you click like, follow, post, and share. And you can find our back episodes, all 363 of them, at nuclearhotseat.com. If you add /blog to the URL, you'll be able to scan 10 episodes at a time. Theme music written by me, sung by Marilee Weber, accompaniment by John Barnard, recorded at Winslow Court Studio in Hollywood. If you would like to get Nuclear Hot Seat delivered via email every week, it's easy. Just go to nuclearhotseat.com and scroll down for the yellow box. This is especially if you are on a tablet or smartphone, just keep going. That's where you can sign up for a weekly email link to the latest show and also a précis of what is included. Now, if you have a story lead, a hot tip, or a suggestion of someone to interview, send an email to info@nuclearhotseat.com. And if you appreciate weekly verifiable news updates about nuclear issues around the world, take a moment to send a donation of any size to nuclearhotseat.com. We really appreciate your support. We are copyright 2018, Libby Halevi and Heartistry Communications. All rights reserved, but fair use allowed as long as proper attribution is provided. This is Libby Halevi of Heartistry Communications, the heart of the art of communicating, reminding you that out of sight is not out of mind when it comes to nuclear waste and the dangers. There you go. You have just had your nuclear wake-up call. So don't go back to sleep, because we are all in the nuclear hot seat.
Nuclear hot seat. What are those people thinking? Nuclear hot seat. What have those boys been drinking? Nuclear hot seat. The corium is sinking. Our time to act is shrinking, but our activists are linking. Nuclear hot seat. It's the bomb.